Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10. Actually, no, it's not a top 10. People are like, what? Is this a new series? No, it's not a Cutter Top 10. It's a Cutter Top 15. That's right. I've expanded this top 10 into 15 because it's the top 15 first round overtime heroic goals of all time in the NHL playoffs. As a rock the Leafs jersey. Of course, with the Leafs not making the playoffs, it's like, what the fuck? Am I going to watch the Stanley Cup playoffs? Well, kind of. I'm hoping Colorado wins for Nazem Kadri so that we could get a Stanley Cup to Kitchener. Although Kadri did bring it to London last time. Hopefully, Kadri can bring it to Kitchener this time. I would love to see that happening. Nevertheless, we're going to look at the top 15 NHL overtime goals of all time. And not all of them were Stanley Cup winning. Well, they were actually all overtime series winning goals except for one. And that guy got into the countdown kind of a pity at number 15. So, yeah, so because left hand is that. And so it's number 15 is Field Fleury 1991. Field Fleury, when he scored for Calgary in Game 6 of the first round against the Edmonton Oilers, that's the greatest overtime goal that did not win a playoff series. Although you could say that in 2023, the one that was it for Hagee or whoever scored in Game 5 off of a Linus Omark Blue Blue would be there. But yeah, Field Fleury's was big because Messier somehow trying to pass back to a teammate in Edmonton, and then Field Fleury steals it and then scores on kind of a breakaway against Bill Ranford, and then Fleury punctuated it with sliding across center ice on his knees and all that, and sliding down. Well, at 5'6", it would be easy for Fleury, as Chris Kuipert says. And third, Fleury and the Flames are in seventh heaven. So that was just amazing and all that. So that's the one. Number 14 is Barclay Goodrow of the San Jose Sharks. So Barclay Goodrow was a pretty good player for the San Jose Sharks. He was okay for them, and then the Rangers overpaid for him, and he didn't do so well. But yeah, Goodrow's goal in 2019 against the Vegas Golden Knights was huge. Vegas was the defending Western Conference champs that somehow in their inaugural season went to the Stanley Cup Finals and lost to Washington. But still, Barclay Goodrow was. Vegas was up 3-1 on the Sharks and were looking for yet another run in their second year of being in the NHL. Unfortunately, though, it failed miserably. They lost games 5 and 6, and then in Game 7 there was that controversial 5-minute major penalty. That should have been at least a double minor. I know the Sharks scored 4 goals during that 5-minute thing, but if it's a 5-minute power play, you score as many goals as you can, and the 5 minutes doesn't get erased and all that. With a double minor, it probably would have only been 2 power play goals. Nevertheless, Barclay did his job in overtime at 5-5, scoring with just under 2 minutes left in the first overtime, knocking out Vegas, sending San Jose to the second round, which was pretty impressive and a little controversial. Number 13 is Johnny Tavares. No, not with the Leafs, although it would have been good to see his goal with the Leafs in 2023. No, it's not that goal. That goal is actually not there. But yeah, it's an honorable mention, if you will. Tavares' overtime goal, sending the Leafs to the second round for the first time in 19 years, was amazing. But did you know that his 2016 goal ended a longer drought? You're thinking, what? I kid you not. So it's New York Islanders, Florida Panthers in the first round of 2016. And this guy named Alan Quinte, Quinte, I thought it was Alan Quiche, scored an overtime goal in Florida, sending the Islanders to Game 6 on home ice. And then John Tavares somehow spun away, put up a wraparound goal. He kind of did that for the Leafs against Tampa in 2023, but he scored a full one wraparound against Roberto Luongo, and the Islanders won the first round. But people forget that John Tavares' goal in 2016 was a longer playoff drought than the Leafs' 19-year series drought. The Islanders had not won a playoff series since 1993. if you can believe that. The Islanders from 1994 to 2015 won 0 playoff series. And you think Leaf fans suffered a lot, but the Islanders suffered even worse. Yeah, John Tavares' first round goal was amazing. Number 12 is Nathan Horton, 2011 Bruins Habs. I know it's a game 7 overtime goal and it should be up higher. But the fact of the matter is that many other goals were scored in like the late games and all that, although there were a few that were not scored in the 7th and deciding game. But the fact of the matter was that Nathan Horton's goal sent Boston to the Stanley Cup second round, taking out the hated Montreal Canadiens and all that. Although the Habs would get revenge on the Bruins 3 years later. Number 11 is Ken Morrow, 1984 Islanders Rangers. The Islanders and Rangers were always strange bedfellows, and with the divisional playoffs the way they are, they almost seem to always bump into each other in the playoffs. The Rangers lost a few key players, including Barry Beck to a shoulder injury, which kind of cost the Rangers. They did win Game 4 on home ice, but in Game 5 at the Nassau Coliseum, it was actually one of the biggest back and forth overtime periods of all time, in which the others had a chance. Then the Rangers, then the Isles, then the Rangers. It was like, who's going to get it? And then the puck somehow got on its way to Ken Morrow with like 8 minutes left in overtime. He shot the puck past, I say Bob Froze, but I'm wrong. No, Glenn Hanlon. He puts it in, and the Islanders win the game and the series. That was big because the New York Islanders had not lost a playoff series since 1979 against those pesky New York Rangers. They were the 4-time defending Stanley Cup champions. They got to the finals, but those pesky Oilers ruined their chance, their drive for 5. But Ken Morrow kept them going. After all, the Olympian did his job. Number 10. I know it says 55 minutes. Number 10 is Andrew Brunette, 2003. So the Minnesota Wild were in their first playoff series after being an expansion team in 2000. They were happy and all that. Jacques Lemaire, the former Devils coach and former Habs overtime hero in the 1977 Stanley Cup Final, was coaching. Minnesota was down 3-1 to the Colorado Avalanche. Everyone thought the Avalanche were good. They had Sakic, they had Forsberg, they had a few pieces. They even had Patrick Waugh around still. But unfortunately, though, Minnesota won Game 5 in Colorado. No big deal. You got a Game 6. Colorado can win in Minnesota. But somehow they botched it. And Richard Park, of all freaking people, scored an overtime goal to force Game 7 in Colorado. No big deal. The Avalanche are on home ice. But somehow, in some way, they made a stupid defensive move, and Andrew Brunette snuck the puck past Patrick Waugh and won the game for the Minnesota Wild. So that was the start of something magical because the Wild actually lost 3 of the first 4 games against Canucks in the second round, but came back to win and had to face Cinderella Anaheim in the conference finals, which they only scored 1 freaking goal off of Shiger. Andrew Brunette. So what's even weird is 11 years later, Minnesota would play Colorado in the first round. Game 7 went to overtime in Denver. Same result. Minnesota scored on a Nino Niederreiter goal that went off of the inside post and in. So, number 9 is Alex Burrows, 2011. So Alex Burrows doing his job. Think of something else, but yeah. So 2011, the Canucks took on the Hawks, who were the defending Stanley Cup champs, who finally broke their 49-year Stanley Cup duck, if you will. They were looking forward to taking out the Canucks because they had done so the past 2 years, but the Canucks were ready. They were up 3-0. They were the top team in the Western Conference, but those pesky Hawks won 3 straight games. Surprised that the Hawks were at number 8. I mean, they had a little bit of a fire sale, sure, but like they forced Game 7 back in Vancouver, 1-1 tie when Chicago tried to clear the puck out of the zone, but couldn't. Alex Burrows found the puck and then slapped a slap shot off over Christian Beauhouet, put the puck in the net. And as Jim Houston of CBC said, it's a beautiful day for an exorcism. Because the Canucks had finally slayed the dragon that was the Blackhawks, went on the Stanley Cup Finals, lost to Boston in Game 7, and then they righted it. Number 8 is Johnny Gaudreau, 2022. Yeah, I know you can accuse me of being favoritism. But Johnny Gaudreau's goal had to be top 10 at the very least. I looked at it, and, with all the other goals being Game 7 goals, I couldn't really do anything about it. But yeah, Johnny Gaudreau was an icon. all that. Everyone knows about Johnny Hockey and, the tragic death and that asshole who should be given the chair for what he did to both Johnny and Matthew Goudreau. And then basically whining they were on the shoulder of the road. Yeah, but you don't drive on the shoulder of the road. Are you nuts? Asshole was drunk. Anyway, yeah, Johnny Goudreau was great for the Calgary Flames before he went to Columbus. He shocked everyone by going to Columbus and spent 2 years with them. I mean, Columbus of all cities, huh? Nevertheless, Johnny Goudreau had that big goal. It was a game seven goal. What am I thinking? Well, anyway, it was a big game seven goal against the Dallas Stars. I thought it was game six. So in the first round against Dallas, Goudreau came in and then somehow, in some way, managed to shoot the puck in at such an angle. It beat the Dallas goalie. It beat Ottinger at a weird angle. And yeah, he won this thing, and Calgary went bonkers. Calgary would get taken out by the Oilers in the next round, but still, I mean, it was good for Johnny Hockey and good for hockey around. And no, despite the fact that the U.S. beat Canada for the men's Olympic gold medal in hockey, I'm not bitter because they paid tribute to Johnny Goudreau by having his two children come out on center ice with the stuff and pose with the gold medal and all that. They had Johnny Goudreau's number 13 jersey with them. I mean, that's something nice. Number 7 is Nikolai Borshevsky, 1993, Leafs Wings. Yes, I know it's biased. I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs guy. But it wasn't completely biased. I mean, I could have put it top 3, and I couldn't. I mean, the fact that Borshevsky is not famously known and the moment wasn't really a super moment, put it down low on this list. So, the 93 Toronto Maple Leafs put up 99 points and the pitch 8-1, or the puck 8-1, hit me. So unfortunately for them, they ended up falling flat. They were third in the division. Chicago was crushing it. Detroit was doing well. They had 103 points. So the Leafs had to play the Red Wings in the first round of the playoffs. The 4-1 versus 4-2 first and 3 divisional stuff that started in 1982 would actually end in 93, and then they went conference seeding 1-8. Nevertheless, Borshevsky and all that. The Leafs won Game 5 on a goal by Mike Foligno, who did the flaming jump, the leaping flaming jump. And then in Game 6 came the Red Wings winning in Toronto. So the Leafs had to go to Game 7 in Detroit. It was a tough one, but somehow Bob Rouse tried to put the puck out of the net, out of the side, but then the Leafs tipped it in. And then Borshevsky, in front of the net, had the puck on a stick, tipped it past Tim Shovelday, and the Leafs had won their first playoff series in 6 years. What's even more big was they took out Detroit and all that, and the fans were happy. I mean, Gilmore was bringing this team back to normal. The Leafs took out Detroit, went on to the Stanley Cup semifinals against the Kings. You know how that happened. I don't need to tell you that. It just pisses me right off. All that. I'm sorry, but that's the way I am. So yeah, that's what it was. But Borshevsky would say unbelievable every time. Number 6 is Patrice Bergeron 2013. I know it should have been higher and all that. It did sting my Toronto Maple Leafs, but the top 5 is the top 5 for a freaking reason. Nevertheless, Patrice Bergeron was a great player. Even though he was a Boston Bruin, I didn't have any problems with him. It's like the Yankees. I hate the Yankees with every bone in my body, but Derek Jeter is a great player, and I always respected Derek Jeter. I always respected Patrice Bergeron. Not Brad the Rat Marchand, but Patrice Bergeron I could respect. After all, he did score his first NHL playoff goal on April 9th, 2004, my 19th birthday against Montreal. But yeah, Patrice Bergeron's goal was big. Boston was playing Toronto in the first round. The Leafs were finally down 3-1, forced to Game 7 back in Boston. We're up 4-1 in the third period. Hockey fans know what I'm talking about. Non-hockey fans will have to explain. So the Leafs were up 4-1 with 10 minutes left. All they needed to do was hang on, and they would play the New York Rangers in the playoffs, who were blowing up Washington in the other matchup of the day. So the Leafs gave up a goal 4-2. No big deal. 2 minutes later, 2 minutes left, 4-3. It was like, there it's Palms time. And then Boston ended up scoring the goal to tie the game, and then Bergeron in overtime past James Reimer. Leaf fans couldn't believe it as the Bruins slayed the dragon and all that, and took out the Rangers before being taken out. I mean, they took out the Penguins. They got to the Stanley Cup Finals against Chicago, but lost Game 6 with 2 goals in 13 seconds. Number 5 is Dale Hunter, 1982. 1982, can you believe it? Really? Well, it's true. So in 1982, the Quebec Nordiques were playing the Montreal Canadiens. This was the new playoff format in the NHL. The 4 divisions, they would have the top 4 teams in each of their divisions and play each other 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3, and all that. Of course, in the Adams division, the Nordiques and Habs would have to bump each other, whereas Boston had to bump into Buffalo. Nevertheless, the first Battle of Quebec, the Bataille Générale in the province of Quebec, and the playoffs happened. Nordiques and Habs were always fighting each other tooth and nail. Montreal had a tough 1982 season. They actually climbed through and did well. Quebec, not so much. But yeah, it was the first time the Nordiques made the playoffs after being omitted from the WHA, and everyone's happy. No, sorry, this wasn't the first time. 1981 was the first time. Sorry. Nevertheless, Quebec and Montreal battled each other 2-2, headed to Game 5. And yes, there was a time the best of five was the first round series, not best of 7. That was 1987. That'll be the next century. But anyway, yeah, Dale Hunter through. Montreal and Quebec were playing a tough thing. They went to overtime when within the first minute there was a shot on net that Rick Wamsley thought he got, and then Dale Hunter out of nowhere slid the puck right under Rick Wamsley. Danny Gallivan and Bobby Hall were on the call for CBC and couldn't believe it that Dale Hunter slid it into net, and Quebec had sunk the Montreal Canadiens of all teams. Quebec would actually sink Boston before losing the conference finals to the Islanders, but still, they got to the Final Four, which was pretty impressive. Speaking of number 4, that's where we are. Number 4, not Bobby Orr, because that was not the opening round. It was in the Stanley Cup Finals. Anyway, 1987, Pat LaFontaine, Islanders Caps. So the Islanders and Caps were facing each other for the third time, I think. And Washington had Bob Mason in the net. The Islanders had Kelly Rudy. Pat LaFontaine, my ass. But Billy Smith was winding down his career, if you will. Washington had a 3-games-to-1 series lead on the Islanders. So you're thinking, well, it's Washington versus Philly for the division crown, right? Wrong-o. The NHL expanded from 5 to 7 with the amount of games you could play in the first round. So the Islanders were still alive. Washington still had to win 1 game out of 3. They could have won Game 5 at home. They didn't. They could have won Game 6 on the island. Didn't. Game 7 at home, it was back and forth. It was a brutal 3-3 score. And then overtime came. And another, and another, and another. So Pat LaFontaine scored the goal in quadruple overtime. They called it the Easter Epic because the game started on a Saturday but ended literally on a Sunday morning, which was, Easter Sunday, 1987. LaFontaine took a slap shot and went between Bob Mason's legs, and the Islanders shocked everyone. The Flyers put them in their place, but still, Pat LaFontaine's goal was big. All the major American networks had the CBC coverage, so that was huge. Number 3 is Carter Verhaeghe 2023, Panthers Bruins. To me, this was actually shocking to see it live and all that, watching it on TV and all that. The first 2 I never got to see on TV live. Of the goals I got to see live, I only got to see live. Like I saw what happened. I think I've only I saw 4 of them. But anyway, yeah, Carter Verhaeghe's was big. The Bruins were huge. 65 wins in the regular season to break the most wins and points by an NHL team. And then they took on those pesky Panthers. Bruins were up 3-games-to-1. It looked like life was going to help them out. But then Lance Olmark made a boo-boo in Game 5 behind the net. Panthers won the series and tied in Game 6. So 3-3 going to Game 7. Boston decided to finally put Jeremy Swayman in the net instead of Olmark. And it worked. Boston was looking good. But then all of a freaking sudden, Florida scored a goal off of scramble in the final minute to take down Boston, to tie Boston, and then force prolongation or overtime. And then somehow Carter Verhaeghe was wide open. He scores the game-winning goal in Game 7. And the Panthers send the 65-win Bruins into shell shock. The Panthers were going to take care of those pesky Maple Leafs and then Carolina and then lose to Vegas in the finals. Nevertheless, it was huge for the Panthers and all that, for that franchise getting to the Stanley Cup finals and all that. But the fact of the matter is that Bruins with 65 wins didn't win the championship. Every league had the same thing. Baseball with the 116-win Seattle Mariners in 2001 and the 1906 Chicago Cubs, even though 116 wins was in 152 games instead of 162. The Patriots of 2007, 16-0 in the regular season. They couldn't win a title. Of course, the Boston Bruins. And Golden State 2016, 73 wins. No title. They lost Game 7. Number 2 is Pavel Bure, 1994. And with that, Pavel Bure's goal was pedestrian. Yeah, sure, it was in double overtime and all that. But there's more to it. There's a good background to it. So the Canucks were the 7th seed in the NHL conference playoffs against the number 2 Calgary Flames. They would go through a divisional round normally, but the NHL changed the rules with new teams and adding the new 1-8 format for the playoffs and all that. If you won your divisions, you would actually be either a 1 or a 2 seed. That actually bit the Leafs in the butt because the Leafs, yeah, they were the 3 seed in 94, but they won their division and would have been the 2 seed. No, sorry. No, Calgary. Sorry. Calgary would have been number 3 normally. It was Detroit, then Toronto, then Calgary for points. But because Detroit and Toronto were in the same division, Toronto dropped down to the 3 seed and had to face the Blackhawks instead of the Canucks. But nevertheless, Calgary proved themselves. They were up 3-1 and looked good. But then Vancouver did something I don't think any team ever did. Yes, there are teams that came back from 3-1 down. Hell, they even came back from 3-0 down. But how many of those teams went through and won 3 games in overtime? Won games 5, 6, and 7 in overtime. Not even the Panthers did that. Yes, Verhaeghe scored in game 5 and 7, but game 6 didn't go over. Anyway, so the Vancouver Canucks did something amazing. You had Jeff Courtnall, Trevor Linden, and Pavel Bure. Overtime goals in games 5, 6, and 7, respectively, to win the series. The Canucks could have easily lost any one of those 3 overtime games, and, we wouldn't be talking about Pavel Bure, and we wouldn't be talking about that stat. What's even more impressive is, yes, we saw Pavel Bure score that breakaway goal, and Don Whitman basically making a good call for Vancouver fans. But let's not forget that the game could have ended in the first overtime, thanks to a double-stack pad save by Kirk McLean, which Canucks fans called the save off of Robert Reichel. The Canucks got to second overtime, and they won the game. So that's just brutal. And Canucks went to the Stanley Cup Finals and got taken out in Game 7 by the Rangers, if you must know. And number 1 is Mayday, 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 Brad May wins it in overtime. The great Rick Jeanneret called, the late Rick Jeanneret, if you will. Jeanneret did Buffalo games for 50-plus years. Can you imagine that? I'm not even 50 now. Anyway, Brad May is number 1. 93 Bruins versus Sabres. So the Sabres were kind of downtrodden and all that. They traded away Dave Anderchuk for Grant Fuhr and all that, and it worked for the Leafs. Anderchuk put up some great points, and the Leafs had a good second scoring option other than Gilmore. But Brad May was just a goon. He was picked in the top 10. Was it 10 or 15? Can't remember. But yeah, Brad May was picked high because he could score goals, but he was also a goon, a fighter. Nevertheless, the Sabres would take on the Bruins in the first round. The Bruins were the top team in the division. Sabres were number 4 in the last year before the 1-8 format. And yes, I know I should have put the Sharks versus the Red Wings for first round upsets. I should have done that. Frig. Because yeah, the Sharks took out the Red Wings in the first round. The Sharks were the 8th seed, and the Red Wings were the 1 seed. And what's bigger was that Jamie Baker goal in Game 7 against the Red Wings in 94. Nevertheless, I can't change my mind. But anyway, yeah, so Sabres-Bruins. Game 1 of the playoff series went to overtime, and Bob Sweeney, who was cut by Boston, and then Buffalo picked him up on waivers, scored against his former team, basically proving revenge they're so very, very sweet, as Cartman would say. Kermit's nice moments. But anywho, the Sabres would end up winning Game 3 on a goal, which was originally credited to Dale Hawerchuk, but it was then credited to Yuri Himalev. And then Game 4, Sabres and Bruins, there was a 5-5 score, and then Brad May somehow scored the goal, made it 6-5, and the number 1 seed of the East, in a sense, Boston Bruins, were taken out by Brad May. It was just amazing. And Mayday, 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 although it was in late April. Just saying. Just saying. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond Edu.